Hi, I'm Don McCulley.
And I'm Andrew Kuykendall. Welcome to another episode of This Stuff is Complicated, where we try to translate insurance into English. Just so you know what we're doing here, I spent 25 years as a consultant, 4 years running a TPA, and 4 years managing captives.
And I'm Don McCulley, and I started my career as an accountant at a bank where I studied as a financial analyst, a credit analyst, breaking down balance sheets and income statements. And I got in the insurance business about 20 years ago. So this fully insured transition topic was my way of learning employee benefits after having done group captives in the property and casualty business for about 5 or 8 years before that. So fully insured transition, Andrew. In 2010, it was all we did in the stop-loss group captive space.
Absolutely. I would say probably 15 of the first 20 groups, probably even more of those were coming from fully insured.
And the first thing we did was we recognized that stop-loss requires a disclosure statement and capital K knowledge about claims. Well, that didn't exist in fully insured in most of the markets we traded in. So we had to learn how to know your population. So we looked at, we asked employers to review their FMLA, which is their Family Medical Leave Act, their disability, which is their workers' compensation, and then the rest of their population. So we asked employers to identify a dispatcher at each company, someone who's supposed to know where everybody is every day. And when you're in a 100-life company, that's a little easier than 500 lives. And we were dealing with mainly 100-life groups.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there are things you just don't know. You may not be aware of a dependent having a condition that is significant medically, but won't show up in there. So there is a reason why we buy the insurance, and we don't expect to catch everything every time.
Right, but Family Medical Leave Act, that was a defined set of knowledge, right? Disability, workers' compensation claims, not part of the employee benefits population. That left, why is everybody else missing work? For those people missing work, are they suffering a condition? Is it a loved one? Is it someone not on our plan? And that dispatcher, there's personal relationships with these companies when they're smaller. So you start with knowing your population through the dispatcher. That's the way you get to the disclosure statement without claims detail. From there, you look at moving from fully insured to self-funding, and you recognize there's disruption. The first disruption is the network differential. The network itself, because the fully insured carriers, in my opinion, practice restraint of trade and don't let you write on their same network when you transition. That disruption kept a lot of people from looking at self-funding because human resources is trying to avoid, correctly I might add, having their voicemail box fill up with complaints, and switching networks is a reason for a complaint.
Absolutely. And in certain areas, metropolitan Southern California, for example, the network overlap could be as high as 95%. Once you get outside of that, though, we were seeing some areas where 60, 70% of the population was needing to change their providers.
Right. And so that's the disruption. The counterbalance of that's the bad disruption. The good disruption is now the employer owns their plan design. The deductible, the copay, and the coinsurance are the employer's decision going forward. We've had groups that we wrote in 2013 when we were in another platform that are still with us today, and they still have the same deductible, copay, and coinsurance. So that's the first disruption. The next is we can disrupt our population through steerage. You remember we worked on networks by design in the early days. We talked about utilization management, and if you could find a MSK, a musculoskeletal platform, right? Yeah. And steer people off the hospital premises, you could save money. And that came down to utilization management. A lot of networks don't let us do that. But there are ways now that the vendors have transitioned to the point where they become creative and figured out ways to help the employer out through incentivization. So that's another good disruption. Someone might have their deductible removed entirely if they save the employer enough money. And that's a really cool thing that's evolved in this fully insured transition world.
And anytime you're removing barrier to care, whether it's by cost or by access, that is going to bring the employee loyalty to the employer as well, especially when it's a dependent.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, self-funding is scary. This is meant to remove that fear for the employers to understand how much they control and own that's now their own decision-making as it relates to how their population gets treated and where they go for service.
And one of the bigger barriers that I saw over the years as a consultant was people being concerned that, my employer is going to know what drugs I'm taking. My employer is going to know what's going on in my back room. That isn't the case at all. All the claims reports we're getting are de-identified. Only the people who have the HIPAA clearance are allowed to see it. And to be honest with you, it's just noise. It's just names and numbers on there, and it's not going to be as invasive as people are afraid of.
You got to explain HIPAA real quick, because you can't just throw out there. We're not at the zoo looking at hippos.
So first off, it's HIPAA with 2 A's, not 2 P's. I will die on that hill. Long story short, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, it protects the health information of the individual. There are uses for it. Insurance companies use protected health information to underwrite. We use it to underwrite. And then your administrator is going to use it to bill, to make sure they're applying the right benefits to the right individual. All of those are perfectly appropriate uses of that data. And ultimately, the CFO and the CEO are not going to see that data unless they specifically request it and have signed an agreement that they cannot use it for business decisions.
Right. So the barrier, the recommendation for who is your HIPAA certified member of your employee population is someone that doesn't have hiring and firing authority. If they don't have hiring and firing authority, they can know who is a high cost claimant, and that would show up on the 50% report or the what's the other one you like? The trigger diagnosis. Right?
Yep.
So the last part of fully insured transition is, how do you get people fully insured onto self-funding without any claims detail? Because we've got a network differential. If we're moving someone from Anthem to Cigna, we're going to lose some claims costs. It's going to be more expensive than that. So that's the first differential we have to look at. But if our age, sex, location is younger, then we're better off. In the early 2010s, we wanted that young San Jose population of technology guys who we thought didn't have a lot of spend. Well, specialty pharmacy changed that. But how do you create credibility in lieu of claims detail? Really, that's one of the main points of this topic today. So that's really number one we wanted to get a point, was how do we create that credibility? The second thing we wanted to talk about was, what is disruption, and is it good or bad? And it's both good and bad, because going forward, the human resources voicemail and email inboxes will be less cluttered because they control the plan design every year. You're not having to explain how much your out-of-pocket is going to cost you based on this out-of-pocket network max changing. And the last point was know your population. So those 3 things are the takeaways from today's episode of This Stuff is Complicated. And I'm Don McCulley.
And I'm Andrew Kuykendall.
And you're wearing a t-shirt.
Joe Russo's Almost Dead. Within the Grateful Dead canon, there's a bunch of songs that typically follow each other. China Cat Sunflower, Indo I Know You Writer. My personal favorite, Estimated Profit, generally goes into
Eyes of the World?
Eyes of the World, exactly. Well, my son bought me a ticket to go to the Greek Theater in LA and see J-Rad. They went from Estimated Profit into Loose Lucy, and I'm still not recovered.
That's disruption.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.